The name David was once synonymous with success, a rocket ship ascent to the top of the charts. Now, it's a name tied to one of the most gruesome and confusing cases to ever grip the internet. For months, the narrative has been set in stone. David, the rising star, murdered his girlfriend Celeste, in a fit of rage, dismembered her body and hid the remains in his Tesla. The motive, we were told, was a fight over a pregnancy. The case, according to the media and the LAPD, was practically closed. The now infamous video of David, head in his hands, admitting "I did it," seemed to be the final nail in the coffin. But in the dark corners of the internet, and now bursting into the mainstream, a different story is being told. A story built not on speculation, but on leaked documents, overlooked evidence, and shocking new revelations that don't just challenge the official narrative, they obliterate it. Everything you thought you knew about this case is wrong. The police aren't just mistaken, they're building a case on a foundation of lies, and we now have the proof. The entire prosecution's case is built on a simple, linear timeline. David and Celeste have a massive public argument. That same night, in a fit of passion and rage, he kills her and is arrested shortly after the body is discovered. It's clean, simple, and it points directly at him. But the official autopsy report, a document the DA's office fought tooth and nail to keep under seal, has been leaked. And what it contains makes the entire LAPD timeline an impossibility. According to the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's notes, based on lividity and the advanced state of decomposition, Celeste had not been dead for a few hours, or even a few days. The report is clear she had been dead for weeks. Let that sink in. Weeks. This isn't a minor discrepancy in the timeline, it's a completely different reality. The prosecution's star theory that David killed her in a sudden violent argument on the night of the incident is scientifically impossible if she was already deceased long before that date. This single fact proves the LAPD either engaged in colossal incompetence or they are willfully ignoring the science to frame their celebrity suspect. It means that for weeks a killer was holding onto Celeste's body, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the perfect scapegoat. But the autopsy report held a second, equally devastating revelation that dismantled the media's entire motive. For months, anonymous sources from within the police department fed the media a compelling, tragic story. Celeste was pregnant, they claimed. She was going to tell David, and his explosive reaction led to her death. It was a motive that painted him as a cornered animal. It was also a complete fabrication. The coroner's report is unequivocal. Celeste was not pregnant. Two pillars of the prosecution's case, the timeline of the murder and the motive for it, are not just wrong, they are fiction. So if Celeste wasn't killed on the night the police claim, and she wasn't killed for the reason the media claims, then what really happened? The truth is infinitely more complex and points to a world of danger surrounding Celeste that the police have seemingly refused to investigate. If David didn't kill her on the night of their argument, then who did? And more importantly, who held her body for weeks, only to place it in David's car at the most opportune moment to frame him? The argument at his house wasn't the scene of a murder, it was the pretext. It was the public event the real killer needed to pin the crime on a high-profile target. This leads us back to that infamous confession. The police presented it as a slam dunk, but knowing the new timeline changes everything. When David, after 14 hours of interrogation without a lawyer, says "I did it," what is he confessing to? He can't be confessing to a murder that happened weeks before he even knew Celeste was missing. The detectives, operating on their false timeline, fed him a story about the argument. They told him his actions that night, the shouting match, led to her death. And in his grief and confusion, he agreed that the fight was his fault. He was confessing to emotional responsibility for a tragedy he didn't understand, while the police recorded it as a confession to a murder he couldn't have possibly committed. It was a trap, sprung with a false timeline and a false motive. The confession is not a smoking gun, it's evidence of psychological manipulation. And with David as the perfect scapegoat, the police felt they had no need to investigate the other, far more credible threats in Celeste's life. Threats that were not only known to her friends, but were even captured on camera. New footage has surfaced, not from the night of the incident, but from the weeks prior, the real time frame of the murder. This footage doesn't show David. It shows Celeste, alive, but in clear distress, engaged in a heated, aggressive confrontation with her neighbors, a confrontation that, until now, the police had no interest in. The police and the media built their entire case on a foundation of lies, a false timeline, a fake motive, and a coerced confession. With David painted as the villain, they had their story, and they stopped looking. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. And while the LAPD focused on their celebrity scapegoat, they ignored the clear and present dangers that were swirling around Celeste in the weeks leading up to her death, the real time frame of the murder. They ignored the warnings, they ignored the witnesses, and most damningly, they ignored the footage. New video has surfaced, retrieved not by police, but by independent investigators. It's from a home security camera dated just 2 weeks before the argument with David. The footage is grainy, but the contents are chillingly clear. It shows Celeste, not with David, but on the street in front of her own apartment, locked in a vicious shouting match with two of her neighbors. This isn't a simple disagreement over noise. Her posture is defensive, her gestures are frantic. The neighbors are aggressive, pointing, encroaching on her personal space. The audio is faint, but certain words are audible. Money you promised, and you're in over your head. This footage is a bombshell. It establishes a clear, documented history of a hostile, potentially financial dispute with people who lived just feet away from her, people who knew her schedule, people who knew her routines. When this footage was presented to the LAPD, their response was a deafening silence. According to sources, it was dismissed as an unrelated civil matter. But how can a volatile, threatening confrontation, occurring within the real time frame of the murder, be considered unrelated? The answer is simple. It didn't fit their narrative. Investigating the neighbors would mean admitting their timeline was wrong and that David might be innocent. It was easier to bury it. And the neighbors are just the beginning. The more you dig into Celeste's life, the more you realize that the media's portrayal of her as a simple girlfriend to a star was tragically incomplete. This isn't about blaming the victim, this is about finding justice for her, and that requires looking at the full picture. Friends have now come forward, speaking to David's legal team, describing Celeste's increasing involvement with a dangerous crowd tied to the city's underground nightlife scene. They speak of a possessive ex-boyfriend who had been stalking her social media for months, leaving cryptic, threatening comments from burner accounts. We've seen the screenshots of these messages. They aren't the words of a jilted lover, they are the words of an obsessive mind. Phrases like, "If I can't have you, no one can, and you can't escape what you owe." While the media was busy twisting David's texts about normal relationship arguments, the real threats were hiding in plain sight. An obsessive ex, a financial dispute with aggressive neighbors. These are not just theories, these are credible, alternative leads with documented evidence, leads the police chose to ignore. They had their celebrity suspect, and the investigation stopped right there. This wasn't an investigation. It was a targeted prosecution from day one. This brings us to the single biggest question that the prosecution has never been able to adequately answer. If David is innocent, how did Celeste's body end up in the trunk of his Tesla? The answer is as sinister as it is logical. It was a frame-up, a calculated, meticulously planned operation designed not just to dispose of a body, but to pin the crime on the most famous person imaginable, creating a media firestorm so intense that no one would ever think to look in another direction. Think about it from the real killer's perspective. Hiding a body is difficult, but framing a celebrity, it's the perfect misdirection. The act itself is so audacious, so theatrical, that it becomes the entire story. A dismembered body in the trunk of a star's signature car is not the work of a panicked boyfriend. It's the work of a cold, calculating killer executing a plan. It's a signature. So how was it done? First, the killer needed access. David's legal team has already submitted evidence that just 3 weeks prior to the incident, David reported the digital key fob for his Tesla as lost after a party at his house. It mysteriously reappeared a day later, and he thought nothing of it. But in that window, it could have been easily cloned. Tesla's digital key system, while advanced, is not infallible. Someone with the right knowledge could have created a ghost key, giving them silent, untraceable access to the vehicle at any time. Next, the killer needed the opportunity. They held Celeste's body for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment, and David and Celeste's public argument gave them that moment. The killer knew the police would hear about the fight. They knew it would create the perfect ready-made motive. While David was establishing his alibi miles away at a recording studio in Burbank, the killer, using their cloned key, gained access to his car. They knew his schedule. They knew he'd be gone for hours. They planted the body, wiped the car down, and vanished into the night. And then came the final brilliant move, the anonymous tip. The call that led police to the industrial park was not from a random citizen. It was almost certainly from the killer or an accomplice, ensuring the body was found quickly, before David could return to his car and discover it himself. This forced the police to find the body, linking it directly to David before he could even process what was happening. It was the final move in a perfectly executed checkmate, a coerced confession, an impossible timeline, and now a meticulously planned frame-up. The case against David isn't just falling apart, it's being exposed as a deliberate and malicious construction. The evidence for this frame-up is overwhelming, but it leaves one terrifying question. Who had the access, the technical knowledge to clone a key, and the intimate understanding of David's life to pull this off? The answer may be closer to David than anyone imagines. The police are investigating David's accomplices, but they may be looking at the wrong team. Because according to new information, David's own inner circle knew everything about Celeste's secret life and the people who were threatening her. And what they are about to tell the world will blow this case wide open. The case against David was built on a series of lies, a fabricated timeline, a manufactured motive, and a coerced confession. We've established how an outside party, someone with a deep-seated grudge against Celeste, could have committed the murder weeks earlier and executed a flawless frame-up. But as David's legal team prepares for a trial that could put him away for life, a new, far more terrifying layer of this conspiracy is emerging. The focus is no longer just on Celeste's enemies, but on David's own inner circle, because the evidence now suggests the frame-up wasn't just an outside job, it was an inside job. The police have been quietly investigating David's friends and team members as potential accomplices. The media has spun this as David having helped with the murder, but the truth is the exact opposite. His team isn't being investigated for helping him kill Celeste, they're being investigated because they knew who really did it, and the real killer may have been one of them. Sources close to the investigation have revealed a shocking turn. David's team knew everything. They knew about the threatening neighbors, they knew about the obsessive ex-boyfriend, and most importantly, they knew Celeste was involved in high-risk private financial dealings that had put her in serious danger. They didn't just know they were actively trying to help her get out. Text messages recovered from the phone of David's manager show panicked conversations with Celeste in the weeks before her death. He was warning her, telling her to cut ties, offering to help pay off a debt she had accrued. This changes everything. David's team wasn't his accomplices in murder, they were witnesses to the real motive. They hold the key to exonerating him, so why haven't they come forward publicly? Fear. The person who killed Celeste is not just a killer, they are a meticulous planner who successfully framed a celebrity. They are smart, ruthless, and still out there. Anyone who could connect them to the crime is a potential next victim. And the most chilling part? The person who had the most intimate knowledge of David's schedule, his security, and access to his property wasn't an ex-boyfriend or a neighbor, it was someone on his payroll. Someone who saw David's argument with Celeste not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. A golden opportunity to eliminate Celeste over their private dispute and let their own boss take the fall. The cloned key fob, the knowledge of the Burbank studio sessions, the entire frame-up points to someone with unfettered access, someone who was trusted. This is why David's legal team has filed a motion demanding the full, unredacted call logs and location data for every single member of David's staff for the entire month before the incident. The prosecution is fighting it, claiming it's an irrelevant fishing expedition, but it's not irrelevant, it's the entire case. Because somewhere in that data is a ghost, a team member who was not where they claimed to be, someone whose location data pings near Celeste's apartment in the week she was missing, or near the industrial park where the Tesla was dumped. The person who framed David made one critical mistake, they left a digital footprint, and it is about to be found. The LAPD is now facing a crisis of its own. They are trapped by their own narrative. After months of telling the world that David is a monster, how can they suddenly pivot and admit they were wrong? How can they admit they ignored evidence of other credible suspects, dismissed crucial footage, and built their case around a confession obtained under extreme psychological duress? They are suffering from the most dangerous affliction in law enforcement tunnel vision. They saw a celebrity, they saw a dead girlfriend, and they saw a quick conviction that would play well on the nightly news. In their rush to close the case, they didn't just arrest the wrong man, they may have allowed the real killer to walk free. So let's recap the facts. Not the media's story, but the hard evidence. A confession that was coerced and misinterpreted. An official time of death that is scientifically impossible, proven wrong by the coroner's own report. A public motive, pregnancy, that was a complete fabrication. A rock-solid alibi placing David miles away from the crime scene. Credible, violent suspects in Celeste's life who were never properly investigated. And a meticulously planned frame-up that required inside knowledge of David's life and technology. The case against David is not a fortress, it is a house of cards, and it is collapsing under the weight of the truth. He is not a killer, he is a scapegoat, the victim of a flawed justice system, and a ruthless killer who is likely still watching this all unfold. The question is no longer did David do it? The real questions are, who on his team betrayed him? Who had a secret deadly vendetta against Celeste? And will the LAPD have the courage to admit their mistake and pursue the real killer before the trail goes completely cold? The media has already convicted him, but the facts tell a different story, and that story is one of innocence.